Hey everyone, Warx here. So we're back with a video that's kind of another Demon Hunter video as we do it from my humble abode here in Founders Point. I just have a lot of work to do on this outside, but I wanted to kind of take this moment real quick to talk about the video that is going to be coming through here. So I have been doing keys across all three specs for the last 2 weeks now since pre-patch is released, and I kind of wanted to talk about how the specs feel currently, and then also what are the things to anticipate and how they're going to impact the specs as we progress to level 90, and kind of do a little bit of future casting, which is still kind of dangerous to do a little bit right now because there's still, we're still 3 weeks away from early access, and then there's going to be all sorts of tuning that's going to happen in the meantime. UI changes are still coming in. In fact, I'm recording this on February 6th. On February 10th, there'll be a patch to the pre-patch that will bring in a slew of class changes and UI changes on that. So if you're watching this after this, some of the information, I kind of talk about it a little bit, but some of it might be slightly misinformed. That's just the nature of the beast. So we're going to do this in alphabetical order. So we're going to start with Devourer Demon Hunter, going to go into Havoc Demon Hunter, and then of course Vengeance Demon Hunter. I'll be using gameplays from my streams, which you can watch over at twitch.tv/warxttv or here on YouTube at this channel. I generally stream 4 to 5 times a week. Sometimes I'll do 6 times a week on the weekends where I do not have my child. But typically I stream, mostly it's going to be Tuesday through Friday in most cases. I'm trying to always make it so that Sunday, Monday are my consecutive days off. So that I can do things like work on other content or try to add things to the stream that hopefully make it more engaging for you to watch. So join me over on either channel if you would like to watch me stream this game. I'll be doing a lot more of course, midnight. I've been playing Star Wars The Old Republic as well. Just going through some single story type stuff there and enjoying the story of Star Wars ever again. So the footage that you're going to be seeing is from actual keys that I've been doing, like I said. And so yeah, there's 2 of me. There's going to be me that's normally here in this bottom left corner. That's from the stream, and then I'll be over on your right side of your screen, and that's going to be the one that's actually talking throughout the stream. So just want to give you the heads up on that. But enjoy this video about Demon Hunter, where they're at right now, and where I think they're going to be going, what to expect to gain, and where do I think they're going to end up kind of falling into the broader picture of classes in World of Warcraft. So enjoy. So let's start with Devourer Demon Hunter. Devourer Demon Hunter has seen some changes that have been hotfixed into the Midnight pre-patch, and as more changes will be coming with the February 10th update to the pre-patch, which will finally make it so that Collapsing Star uses soul fragments on completed cast rather than started cast. But Devourer Demon Hunter has obviously been very much a point of emphasis for Blizzard. Very clearly, they want the spec to make a good first impression. It was the same way with Augmentation Evoker back in Dragonflight. Generally speaking, I think Blizzard wants any new classes or specs to have this good impression. Now, early on in the pre-patch, when we were getting there, content was dying very, very quickly, and a lot of people maybe were still trying to adjust their secondary stat distribution for their Devourer Demon Hunters, which favor Haste Mastery over, say, Crit Mastery for Havoc, for example. I think a lot of people were struggling to figure out the little gameplay loops, and there's a lot of little tips and tricks that can be done as well that will allow for Devourer to find little things that you can do to, mainly during Void meta, increase your soul generation so that you are getting to your 30 stars or 30 fragments that you need in order to get there very quickly. So with the changes that have been made, soul generation now is much faster, to the point that I'm actually a little worried as we get into level 90 content and we start getting proper gearing going for Devourer Demon Hunter, that they may have to revert the nerf to, or the change to consume, adding a second soul fragment that it generates when you cast it, because it used to only be 1, now it's going to be 2, and then there's a talent in the Annihilator tree in particular that make it so that it will actually generate 3 soul fragments. So I'm a little worried about that. But where we're at right now is that it's a spec that actually does play pretty well. It is tuned somewhat well as well. As you can see, I'm keeping up with a Devastation Evoker on this first pull, which is obviously the massive Prior Sacred Flame pull. But the spec overall is in a really good place to feel like, the buttons you're pushing are impactful now. You're getting in and out of Void meta very well. Obviously, this is an Annihilator playstyle. The Scarred playstyle in Raid still actually does feel pretty good itself, and so there are opportunities for the spec to have like this divergent gameplay. I've still talked about the need for maybe another ability. I still believe that's the case, although as I've been doing content in the pre-patch and then doing a little bit of extra stuff on beta, I've noticed that maybe that is a possible overstatement, but I still feel like that the rotation is going to get overly simple, and you're not necessarily playing a rotation, you're playing a game against your resource bar, which, I mean, there are specs that would love to have that. So let's be real. It could be a good or bad thing. It's going to really, I think, mostly depend on your point of view. Now, what are the things that we can expect to achieve as we start to level to 90 and go from there? Now, obviously, we're getting the 3 extra class talent points. I think for Devourer, you're probably going to see them be put into reducing the cooldown on Void Shift, and then potentially even, and then of course grabbing the extra point to reduce Darkness's cooldown from a 5-minute cooldown to a 3-minute cooldown, because right now that is missed quite a bit in certain Mythic Plus scenarios that I've been doing on my 11, 12, 13 keys that I've just been mucking around with for crest farm purposes. So I think those are going to be really the things that we see. So you get more mobility, and then more thing we saw right there, just the issue with Void meta and Collapsing Star. Went to go cast my Collapsing Star, mob died while I was casting it. I lost the Collapsing Star cast, and then I lost my meta right after that as a result. But the other thing on level, that we're going to see, obviously we get our extra hero talent points, which is going to flesh out the tree. Now that's going to mean that we're getting our extra consume damage. You're going to get some defensive ability where every Voidfall meteor that you have also makes it so that you take 2% reduced damage. Now that's not a huge defensive buff, because the truth is that once you hit 3 Voidfall meteors, you're typically trying to get those out so you can get the damage out from Voidfall meteor anyways, so that's not going to be a big thing. And then of course we're getting our Apex talents. Now for Devourer, I do believe that the Apex talents will be very much a set of talents that you will take, because it gives you a flat damage increase to your cosmic damage, which is all your damage. It will make it so that your Collapsing Star will do extra crit damage based on your critical strike rating, and then you will of course get the big one that I think is like the biggest quality of life change here, in that you will get a Collapsing Star as soon as you enter meta. Now with those, that's going to really help speed up the damage profile a little bit of Devourer, especially within meta. I think it's hugely important for Annihilator builds. It's a little less valuable for Scarred builds, but will still have good value, because you still generally will get 2 Collapsing Stars in your Scarred builds in most ideal scenarios. And there is a talent so that each Collapsing Star that you cast increases the damage of your next Collapsing Star. So like the goal is obviously like the more that you Collapsing Star, the more damage you're going to do, which again plays into that race against time type playstyle. So overall, I think we are looking at a situation where Devourer Demon Hunter feels good on a level 80 impression. I think at level 90, as we get the extra Apex talents, you get the Collapsing Star entering Void meta, you get the additional Annihilator and Scarred talent points, and you get the little bit of utility that you can grab out of the darkness cooldown, or you can grab extra glide speed, which is what I would probably grab if I were, at least for leveling, just because it makes you a little bit more mobile versus having a darkness cooldown that you'll basically never use. So it's in a good place now, and I think at level 90 it's going to continue to be in a good place. Like I said, I think Blizzard is very obviously trying to make this a spec that has a good debut season. It would not surprise me if it's the meta DPS spec and we don't see very much of Havoc at all. But I think the overall impressions that it's made is that it's made a good first impression. There's some harsh quality of life stuff that they have been slowly ironing out, with things like the Collapsing Star change coming soon, making it so that your ramp into your first Void meta is much quicker. And they've done some tweaking with talent builds, with the hero talents in particular, so that you are finding yourself in a position where you're not being like fully dominated by one hero talent. So you got to get an opportunity to experience both playstyles in ways that are unique. Now I'd like to see them do something to make a more Annihilator single target build maybe a little bit more viable, and the reverse for Scarred, make a Scarred Mythic Plus build a little bit more viable. But what changes they can make right now, I don't know. I think we'll have to wait to see what our Season 1 data is going to tell us before we can make any real changes, and hopefully in like 11.0.5 they can make some adjustments to make the spec even better. So yeah, Devour Demon Hunter I think has made a solid first impression. I think it's going to continue to make a solid first impression. Of course, visually it's a beautiful spec, and I am looking forward to trying it out with my guilds and raid teams and stuff like that at level 90 and see how we're at. I've obviously been playing it on beta, so I know kind of what the loop is going to feel like and how it's going to feel. But obviously once you get into live games and you're progging content, or you're pushing different levels of progress across the board, obviously it's going to see how it plays out across the entire spectrum of things. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Devour as we level up, but I'm excited to see what happens, and I think it's in a good spot. All right, let's talk Havoc Demon Hunter now. The Havoc Demon Hunter has seen not a ton of changes, obviously not a new spec. Didn't get the overhaul that Vengeance Demon Hunter, I wouldn't even say overhaul, it didn't get the amount of attention that Vengeance Demon Hunter got, but still had some things happen. Obviously we lost a couple of abilities in Netherwalk, we lost Sigil of Flame and Sigil of Spite, and right now the current tuning plays heavily into the Fellscarred playstyle. Now, Havoc Demon Hunter is back to playing both mover and no remover builds, depending on your preference. They both are roughly equal in damage. So I've played a little bit of both and have tried doing both. You'll see I make a grave mistake here in just a little bit if we get to it with the mover build. But here's the thing about Havoc. Right now, I think it's in a very tough position where it's having to give up so much single target in order to obtain even relevant AoE. And if you try to spec into like a hybrid of both, you're just not good at both either way. So it's in a kind of a weird position where they need to do a little bit more work in the spec tree to try and make some of these builds feel a little bit more evened out, I would say, to where it's not so swingy. Because you'll notice that like here in this Arakara, I was sitting, I sit around 30k once we get the pulls all gathered up and I really get going. And if I was playing my mover buffs correctly, I'd sit around 30k, which was roughly equal with the Fury Warrior. And obviously we both failed to the Aflock here, but that was more of an item level difference. He was like 164. The other two of us were in the mid 150s. So it's to be expected. But this, right there, I unfortunately mover fail. But the overall, the build right now swings too heavily between single target and AoE. So if you spec for more single target setups like you would for like a raid build, you have almost no AoE damage outside of like Immo Aura and Blade Dance and a little bit of I-Beam. And if you spec into AoE where you grab things like Glaive Tempest, you're sacrificing things like Chaos Strike damage, as well as some single target stuff in Blade Dance that will make it so that you are able to have a little bit of more effective single target with like Trail of Ruin and stuff like that. So it's in a weird position with its talent build right now where I think it swings a little bit too heavy one way or the other, and we need to figure out a way to correct that. That said, the general flow of the spec hasn't really changed other than the fact that you don't have your sigils that you have to work with outside of Sigil of Misery. And so the play style and stuff like that hasn't really adjusted a lot. So if you like the way Havoc played, particularly in Season 3, even without the Eldrazi build, then you're going to like how Havoc is playing so far in pre-patch. And as we move forward into Midnight, I think you're going to like the way that he continues to play, of course, barring tuning. Now, I've been on record saying that I do think Havoc is still going to be the best leveling spec come the Midnight leveling experience, since Devour doesn't have a lot of sustain unless you're running in groups of people that can pull mobs off of you, in which case, roll for it. But if you're leveling solo, then I think you'd still be better off playing Havoc. Now, what to expect to gain from leveling up as Havoc. So we're obviously, like I said, in 3 class talent points, and I think for all 3 specs, we're going to see the class talent tree kind of be the same. At in-game content, you'll grab the darkness cooldown reduction, and then you'll probably grab 2 other points, whether it's like a defensive node making it so that fire damage dealt reduces damage you take, or you'll grab Fel Rush cooldown so that you can Fel Rush more often, especially if you're playing a mover setup type build. So there's all sorts of options here that you will have as Havoc. And then, of course, in your Scarred and Eldrazi builds, you'll just round out your trees, which I do think helps Eldrazi Reaver more than it helps Feldscarred, to the point that they just nerfed Eldrazi Reaver recently, because it's starting to perform well, particularly in Mythic Plus again. So that playstyle may return. Still some tuning to be worked out, I guess, and some things to be figured out. But yeah, right now it looks like that Eldrazi may be making a comeback in Season 1 for Mythic Plus. Boo or hiss that as you see fit. And then your Apex talent revolves around making it so that the hunt is an integral part of your rotation. So you get a cooldown reduction on it and makes your I-beam wider and do more damage. So one of the key things that you're going to want to do, like if you're playing a mover build, like on opener, you'll hunt in Fellblade to activate your inertia buff, and then you'll immediately I-beam right after that if you have enough fury going, so that you gain that extra fury that also is gaining that extra damage from the inertia build. So there is some nice little interplay. There's going to be a little bit of complexity built into Havoc's rotation, particularly with the mover build versus the no mover build, but it's going to add that. And then you're going to gain things like the hunt allowing doing more damage with things like Blade Dance, and then the Capstone talent is going to make it so that when you Blade Dance, it actually has after you do I-beam, or after you hunt and I-beam, that your Blade Dance will actually reset its own cooldown. So you have a chance to do back-to-back I-beams, back-to-back Blade Dances, particularly in AoE situations, which could be very viable. They're still kind of figuring out like the little quirks to making it the best use of time. And there's a buff that you can track that will make it do extra damage afterwards as well. So there's a lot of little things coming for Havoc. Is it going to be big enough to overtake Devourer? I think at least for the first season, I don't think so. And I don't think it's because Blizzard hates Havoc. I think they just really want Devourer to have a good debut, because it's been one of the more hyped features outside of housing with this expansion. So they really want that to land, and anytime there's a new spec or class, they really want that spec to land and feel good. So I think that's going to be the big focus, is that they're probably going to, in some ways, purposely overtune Devourer versus Havoc a little bit, so that you're going to see the majority of people playing Devourer. Now, in future seasons, obviously that could change depending on talent tuning and things like that, but that's just my thought process and guess on this. So overall, what are we looking at for Havoc as we get into level 90? I think it's going to be a solid spec, but is going to just fall behind. So it's going to fall into the category that other classes do. So DK, Warriors this way. Obviously, all the pure DPS specs fall this way, where a lot of players are just going to play whatever's quote unquote the best tuned in terms of damage. So you'll see, for example, you'll see Ardent DK DPS players a lot of them will just swap between Unholy and Frost depending on what's better. And then you have your pocket of people that are like their Ardent Frost DKs or their Ardent Unholy DKs. They play it through thick and thin. Same with Warriors. I think you're going to see Havoc and Vengeance and Devourer rather fall into that category. You're just going to have your people that they love Havoc and they're going to play Havoc no matter what, and shoutouts to those people. And you're going to have your people that are only playing DH because Devourer is now part of the ability for them to be played. So it's going to fall very much into that class, and I think you're going to see it happen back and forth. But I think Havoc, if you really, really enjoy Havoc and you don't really care for the Devourer playstyle, then I think you're going to be pretty happy. And with the things that you have coming down level 90, it's going to add little bits of rotational complexity to a spec that, historically is either had too much or too little. And I think they finally hit the mark where it's going to be just right, where you can add, and you can choose to add even more complexity through playing a mover build, or you can choose to pull back a little complexity with a no mover build. And frankly, right now, I think they're playing roughly equal, which is also pretty rare for a interspec build diversity style of play to happen. We've seen it not achieved very well, generally speaking, on Frost DK in the past, where either dual wield was super dominant or two hand was super dominant. We're going to see that again with Survival Hunter now that they can dual wield, but I think it's still going to be a situation where two hand is going to dominate forever on that spec. So it's going to fall into a lot of those same categories. So But yeah, Havoc I think is good from a playstyle standpoint. I like the things that they've got. The biggest thing that it suffers from right now is that I don't think it's tuned very well. Abilities don't feel like they really hit in the way that they should, so hopefully they make some adjustments, whether it's just aura buffing or making small tweaks to certain talents in order to create that. And the damage profile needs to be cleaned up a little bit. It swings too far single target versus AoE, depending on the build that you are trying to play. And finally, Vengeance Demon Hunter. So Vengeance Demon Hunter got quite a few changes that were mostly, generally speaking, I think somewhat small, but became very impactful as you put the whole package together. So for those that are not aware, the biggest changes are that Spirit Bomb is now on a 20-second cooldown baseline, so that you're not always spamming it in AoE situations. So it really cleans up the how do I spend my fury for players that are coming into the spec new or even intermediate level, where you basically are soul cleaving until the Spirit Bomb is up, and then once Spirit Bomb is up, you kind of are Spirit Bombing all the time, particularly with the Soul Barrier talent, even though it's going to get a nerf, coming through and giving you like a decent little absorb shield that will make it so that you put off like a lot of the healing. So currently in pre-patch, we're playing a lot of Annihilator spec. You see right here, I've got my Void Meteors that are just about to fall. It's the new hero talent tree, obviously shared with Devour. I think visually it's really cool with the Voidfall Meteors coming in. It gives you an even more diverse damage profile in terms of damage types, because you now do physical damage, you do fire damage through Immol Aura, Sigil of Flame, and Sigil of Spite, and then you're also doing cosmic damage through, I think now Spirit Bomb is cosmic damage, as well as the Voidfall Meteors themselves. So there's just a lot of really, so like if you like that type of thing, like you have a nice little diverse damage profile. The other thing that they did is they really cleaned up the way defensively the spec works, so that there's not a lot of really stupid, fun, dumb little interactions, not fun, unfun rather, interactions. And they made Demon Spikes a lot more straightforward as an active mitigation tool. So before pre-patch, throughout the War Within, and throughout even previous expansions, you never had 100% uptime on your Demon Spikes. They were one of, if not the only tanks really to make it so that you could not have 100% uptime. Like Shield Block you could have uptime on, Shield of the Righteous you could have big uptime on, obviously Brewmaster through Stagger you have big uptime on, Guardian Druid with Iron Fur, you know, like once you get the resources going, you had 100% uptime. With Demon Hunter, it was the only tank where it didn't matter how good you were, you could not get 100% uptime on your Demon Spikes, and so you had to do weird rotations with min-maxing things like Demonic Feldevs, Metamorphosis, and things like that in order to have your uptime really be worth it, so to speak, to avoid just getting absolutely destroyed randomly. Now they've changed that to where you can either skip a talent called Feed the Demon, which basically reduces the Demon Spikes cooldown for every 20 Fury that you spend, or you grab a second charge of Demon Spikes, so you kind of always have one in the pocket for you to use. There are people that run both. I don't know if that's totally necessary, but if you feel like you want to be super safe, then you can definitely run both, and you'll never have this drop in uptime on your Demon Spikes. So a lot of little things. They brought Fiery Brand back into the fold. It now does damage over time, as well as has talents, of course, that will spread it to multiple targets and things of that nature. So there's a lot of push to make Fiery Brand kind of both a big defensive cooldown, but also it's a consistent damage tool in AoE. So you have that, you have Spirit Bomb as burst AoE damage, and then Immol Aura as consistent AoE damage. Obviously with Annihilator being the new talent tree, does really well. And then I even think Eldrazi still has potential to be quite good. I think right now it's just kind of falling behind from a tuning perspective. They probably need to do something to buff Eldrazi for Vengeance. What specifically, again, I'm not sure. I'd have to really dig into numbers on it, and I have not yet done that. So what do we expect to get over the course of the next 10 levels? So like the other two classes, like I said, we're going to get the Darkness cooldown reduction. You can get some Infernal Strike cooldown reduction, or there's potentially even to grab as many movement speed talents as you want, so that you're always going to be able to, whether it's in Mythic Plus or Raid, be able to get out of and move quickly to the places that you need to get to. there potentially is room to grab that second charge of Demon Spikes if you really want it, but like I said, I think in most content you can just take the talent point and get something a little bit more useful out of it in other places on the class tree. In the hero talent trees, I think that the filling out of the hero talent trees will actually benefit the Eldrazi tree a little bit more than Annihilator will for Vengeance. But I still think right now just Annihilator is just damage-wise just tuned better, and the defensive value that each hero talent brings is so kind of minor that I don't think it truly matters from a defensive perspective. So you're just kind of playing whatever is going to be like the best one. And then of course you get your Apex talents as Vengeance. Now the Apex talent for Vengeance I actually think is really fun. I think it's really interesting. So what happens is that every time you spend Fury, you gain this thing called Enrage the Demon. And basically what happens is that you get a chance to either proc your Metamorphosis cooldown for free, you know, where it doesn't proc its cooldown, it doesn't you know, but it has a shorter duration. So normal meta is 20 seconds. I believe this one is 10 seconds. And you'll notice it when you get it, it's a big green bar that goes just above your character's head, and like the spell proc thing that goes around your character. So they put in a built-in way for you to know when you can use it. But the other cool thing about this is that when you don't proc it, you gain an increased chance to proc it every time you spend Fury after that, and you gain 1% agility until you proc it. Once you proc it, that agility goes away, but then you get your meta. So there's offensive and defensive benefit the entire time that you're using the Apex talent. I actually think it's really smart design. I really like it personally. And it's putting you back into a playstyle of making sure that you spend as much time in your meta as possible and putting less emphasis on the sigils as a result. Now, there's some little things that need to be cleaned up in the spec to kind of emphasize and make talents better support that playstyle. But overall, I think Vengeance is in a really good spot. Again, is it going to be meta? It's really hard to tell. So many tanks right now are actually pretty good. Obviously, something like Brewmaster Monk is getting a lot of hype right now. And Vengeance has never really been a meta tank in Raid because Havoc has always been pretty good. I think, at least for this first season, that's not going to change because Devourer is going to be really good. So you're kind of in a fun position if you're like a Vengeance tank where, you know, you play it if you really, really love it. But if you're someone that's looking to play what's the best tank for your raid progress, it's probably not going to be Vengeance, even if you really want it to be Vengeance. Now, that said, in Mythic Plus, I think it'll be solid. I think it'll be really good. Is it going to be the best? Who knows? Again, Brewmaster's getting a lot of hype. Prot Paladin getting a lot of hype. And I've been seeing a lot of people trying out and doing some crazy damage with Prot Warrior lately. So I think there's room in the world for both all these tanks to potentially shine, which to me, that's the healthiest tank meta that we can get. So it's really unknown in terms of that perspective, but what I will say is that I think Vengeance Demon Hunter, if you're coming into the spec as a newbie, this is probably the best time to do it and enjoy it. And if you're looking to try out a tank, I actually think this one is pretty straightforward to figure out. Like, the biggest thing that you want to do is, you know, right now Fury generation is a little weird, but some of that could just be, again, I'm mostly statted still, you know, for Havoc. It's a still heavy crit mastery. Vengeance always favored more of a haste crit setup for more parry with Demon Spikes. So as I'm kind of developing more haste gear for my Devourer set, it's kind of crossing over into what I'm wearing for my Havoc set. So, you know, we see that play. But overall, I think this is the tank that is in a pretty good spot. I think it's pretty healthy. Like I said, there's some small things about the spec that need to be cleaned up, but I think that's something that every spec right now could argue they really need. I would like to see potentially more done with Eldrazi to try and make the hero talents a little more competitive with each other, because I do think that unless something changes tuning wise, just from a design perspective, Annihilator for Vengeance is kind of always going to be good. Whereas Eldrazi, it's going to take very specific scenarios for it to be good, and I don't think that's healthy. So maybe do something with Eldrazi to try and make it more generally acceptable to play, because right now I just don't see that it is. So the spec itself, like I said, as we level up to 90, I think it's getting a lot of really good things. I don't think it's anything that is like fundamentally game changing, except for the fact of the Apex talent, which is going to make your builds a lot more reliant and pushing through meta type setups, which means things like Fiery Brand are going to become more important, and you're going to put less emphasis on your sigils. Like Sigil of Flame is basically a way to gain some AoE aggro, but I don't really use it for anything beyond that. I mean, I use it rotationally on cooldown just because it's, you know, a good way to generate constant damage on all targets, but like it's, for the most part, like it's not going to be a huge part of your damage profile like it was late in the War Within when you had the 2 charges and you could basically keep 100% uptime on the dots the entire time. So what do you think about the way that all 3 Demon Hunter specs have been playing in pre-patch, and what are you looking forward to most as we move forward into Midnight, as we step closer and closer to Midnight rather, and what are the things that you want to see the most as we get into level 90? What are some things that you are concerned about or excited about as we get to level 90? Leave a comment below. Remember to like, share, subscribe to the video. I want to take time to say thank you all for helping me on this journey. I just crossed 1,100 subscribers recently, which is amazing. I'm on the road to 1,200, and, you know, continue to push the watch hours so that I can continue to get my videos out. If you feel like they're helpful, sharing them, liking them, commenting on them basically tells YouTube that, hey, we need to push this guy's video up the rankings more. Like right now, if you search like my Vengeance Demon Hunter pre-patch guide, it's like the 12th video that you'll find on the list. I'd love for it to become a lot closer to, you know, the top 2 or 3 videos on the list. So definitely help me out with that if you can. And until the next video, I hope you all stay safe. Hope you enjoy yourself. You're having fun. You keep on gaming. We'll see you next time.